July 24th, 1943, 22:57 hours, 18,000 feet above the North Sea. The Halifax bomber shudders through another pocket of turbulent air, its 4 Merlin engines roaring against the darkness. Squadron leader John Searby checks his watch, then peers through the Perspex nose at the invisible coastline ahead. Somewhere below, Germany sleeps, unaware that in exactly 43 minutes, Hamburg will become the first city in history to be systematically incinerated by science. But first, the Pathfinders must mark the way. Searby's aircraft isn't carrying the standard bomb load tonight. Instead, his Halifax is packed with target indicators, canister bombs filled with pyrotechnic compounds that burn in brilliant reds, greens, and yellows. Behind him, 746 bombers follow in waves, their crews watching for one thing: colored fires on the ground. Where the Pathfinders mark, the main force bombs. It's a system so precise, so devastating, that Luftwaffe intelligence officers have dismissed it as impossible. They're about to learn otherwise. The concept seems almost absurdly simple now, though it took 3 years of catastrophic failure to reach this point. In 1940, RAF Bomber Command discovered a horrifying truth: most crews couldn't find their targets. Reconnaissance photos revealed bombs scattered across German farmland, sometimes 30 miles from the intended factory or railway. Crews reported successful attacks on blazing targets, which turned out to be decoy fires lit in empty fields. The Luftwaffe laughed, Churchill fumed, and thousands of young men died dropping bombs on nothing. Air Marshal Arthur Harris knew something had to change. The entire strategic bombing offensive, Britain's only way to strike back at Nazi Germany, was failing. Not from lack of courage, but from simple, brutal geography. At night, from 15,000 feet, every German city looked like every other. Navigation relied on dead reckoning, celestial sightings, and luck. Most crews genuinely believed they'd bombed the right target. They were wrong. The solution came from an unlikely source: Group Captain Sidney Buffton, a former bomber pilot who'd witnessed the chaos firsthand. His proposal was revolutionary: create an elite force of the best navigators and bomb aimers, equipped with the latest technology. They would arrive first, identify the target precisely, and mark it with flares. The main force would then bomb the markers, not the invisible city below. Bomber Command's group commanders hated the idea. They saw it as admitting their crews weren't good enough. They protested that concentrating talent in one unit would weaken all others. Some called it elitist. Others said it was impossible. Harris overruled them all. On August 15, 1942, Pathfinder Force became official. Its commander, Don Bennett, an Australian navigator so skilled that other pilots called him the human compass. At 32, Bennett was young for such responsibility, blunt to the point of rudeness, and utterly convinced that precision could win the war. He had 7 squadrons, 5 equipped with Lancasters, Halifaxes, and Stirlings, 2 with the magnificent Mosquito, the wooden wonder that could outrun German fighters while carrying a 4,000-pound bomb. The Luftwaffe's initial assessment of Pathfinder operations was dismissive. Intelligence reports called the colored flares mere harassment and navigational errors. German night fighter pilots reported seeing the markers, but assumed they indicated crashed aircraft or lost bombers jettisoning pyrotechnics. This miscalculation would cost them everything. Because the Pathfinders weren't lost, they were exactly where they needed to be. The first Pathfinder raids were chaos disguised as precision. On August 18, 1942, Bennett's crews marked Flensburg with flares that drifted 2 miles off target in high winds. The main force bombed empty suburbs. German newspapers mocked the British Christmas lights. Bennett didn't make excuses. He went back to his maps and started calculating wind speeds at different altitudes, drift patterns, and burn times. Within weeks, the system evolved into something far more sophisticated than simple flare dropping. The Pathfinders developed a three-tier marking system that would become their signature. First came the illuminators, Lancasters carrying photo flash bombs that turned night into day for 30 seconds, long enough for the next wave to see the ground clearly. Then, the primary visual markers dropped target indicators directly on aiming points, factory roofs, railway junctions, city centers. Finally, backers up refreshed the markers throughout the raid, ensuring the glow never faded even as smoke obscured the target. The target indicators themselves were engineering marvels. The 250-pound canisters split open at 3,000 feet, scattering 60 pyrotechnic candles that burned at temperatures exceeding 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Red markers meant bomb here. Green indicated alternative targets. Yellow warned of decoys. Each color burned for 3 minutes, just long enough for one bombing wave to attack before new markers refreshed the aim point. But technology alone wasn't enough. Bennett handpicked his crews with ruthless standards. Navigators needed at least 2 completed tours, 40 operations minimum. Bomb aimers had to demonstrate accuracy within 300 yards from 18,000 feet. Pilots needed night flying experience and the ability to hold steady through flak. Wireless operators required Morse code speeds of 25 words per minute. Bennett rejected 70% of volunteers. Those who made it wore the Pathfinder badge, a golden eagle over the letters PFF, with fierce pride. Flight Lieutenant Harold Coverdale, a navigator in 156 Squadron, described the pressure. "We weren't just finding targets, we were responsible for 700 aircraft behind us. If we marked wrong, thousands of bombs would hit the wrong city." The weight of it kept you awake more than enemy fighters ever did. The Luftwaffe began taking notice after the November 1942 raid on Turin. For the first time, bomb damage photos showed concentrated hits in a tight pattern around the Fiat works. German intelligence officers studied the timing, precise marker flares followed by waves of bombers in perfect sequence. This wasn't random, this was orchestration. Orders went out to night fighter units. Priority targets waren now aircraft-dropping colored flares. German fighters shot down 18 Pathfinder aircraft in Dezember allein. Der Loss Rate, nearly 8% pro Operation, war doppelt das der Main Force. But Bennett refused to pull back. Instatt, equippte seine Mosquito-Crews mit einer revolutionären neue Device, Obo. Obo war Navigation bei Geometrie. 2 Groundstationen in England transmittierten Radiopulse. Aircraft equipped with transponders received the signals and retransmitted them. By measuring the time difference, ground controllers could calculate the aircraft's position to within 300 yards, even in total cloud cover, even through smoke, even when the crew couldn't see the ground at all. The controller would count down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, release. The bombs would drop blind, guided only by mathematics and radio waves. The Germans intercepted oboe signals, but couldn't jam them. The frequencies changed constantly. Luftwaffe technicians called it impossible precision. They were half right. It was impossible by their standards. It was normal for Pathfinder Force. July 24, 1943, 23:38 hours, Hamburg approach. Serby's navigator calls out the final bearing correction. Below, the city sprawls along the Elbe River, 1.8 million souls sleeping in timber-framed apartments that haven't changed since the Hanseatic League built them 4 centuries ago. The Luftwaffe has 44 flak batteries ringing Hamburg. Searchlights begin sweeping the sky. Somewhere down there, air raid sirens are wailing. None of it matters anymore. The Pathfinders have arrived. 2 minutes to target, the navigator announces. Serby can see other Pathfinder aircraft now, silhouettes against the searchlight beams. A Lancaster to port drops photo flash bombs. The city explodes into frozen clarity. Docks, warehouses, residential blocks laid out like a map. The aiming point, the district of Barmbek, glows in the magnesium light. Bomb doors open. The aircraft lurches as the first target indicators tumble free.
Serby watches them fall, calculating trajectory against wind drift. At 3,000 feet, the canisters burst. 60 red candles ignite simultaneously, burning in a perfect cross pattern directly over Barmbek. Other Pathfinder crews see the markers and add their own. Within 90 seconds, the aiming point blazes with artificial suns, red, then green as backers up add layers of color. The main force arrives 3 minutes later.
728 bombers, each carrying up to 10,000 pounds of high explosive and incendiaries. They don't need to find Hamburg. They only need to bomb the colored fires. And they do, with mechanical precision. What Hamburg experiences that night has never happened before in human history. The first wave drops 4,000-pound blockbuster bombs that shatter buildings and expose their timber frames. The second wave follows with incendiaries, hundreds of thousands of 4-pound magnesium sticks that ignite everything combustible. The third wave adds more blockbusters to spread the flames. By 0040 hours, Barmbek is burning in a perfectly defined grid pattern, each block ignited with mathematical accuracy. But the real horror begins on the second night. July 27, 1943, the firestorm. The Pathfinders mark Hamburg again, this time concentrating on the working-class districts of Hammerbrook and Rottenburg sort. The bombing follows the same precise pattern. Blockbusters, incendiaries, more blockbusters. But tonight, atmospheric conditions create something unprecedented. The fires merge into a single conflagration so intense it generates its own weather system. Temperatures in the burning districts reach 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to melt glass, to vaporize water, to ignite human beings through radiant heat alone. The superheated air rises at hurricane velocity, creating a vacuum that sucks in oxygen from surrounding areas. Winds of 150 miles per hour roar through the streets, feeding the flames with fresh air. Trees are torn from the ground. People trying to flee are lifted off their feet and thrown into the inferno. The firestorm becomes self-sustaining, beyond any fire brigade's ability to control. It burns for 3 hours, consuming 8 square miles of Hamburg in a phenomenon meteorologists will later call area conflagration. Survivors describe the sound, a continuous roar like 1,000 locomotives, punctuated by exploding gas mains and collapsing buildings. The smoke column rises to 25,000 feet, visible from bomber command bases in England. Rescue workers entering Hammerbrook on July 28 find scenes that defy description. Thousands died in underground shelters when firestorms consumed all oxygen, suffocating entire families without burning them. Others melted into the asphalt streets, their bodies reduced to carbonized shapes. The Elbe River is clogged with corpses. A single shelter near the Bullerdijk railway station contains 370 bodies, most of them women and children. The Pathfinders had marked with precision. The main force had bombed with accuracy, and 42,600 civilians had died in 4 nights of systematic destruction. Operation Gomorrah, named for the biblical city destroyed by fire, killed more people than Britain lost to bombing during the entire war. German authorities couldn't hide the scale. Nearly 1 million Hamburgers fled the city in panic. Goebbels' propaganda ministry banned newspapers from publishing casualty figures, which only fueled rumors of death tolls exceeding 100,000. Albert Speer, Hitler's armaments minister, later wrote, "Hamburg had put the fear of God in me. We might lose the war from the air." August 17, 1943, Luftwaffe Fighter Command Headquarters, Diemen, Netherlands.
Major Hajo Hermann slams reconnaissance photos onto the conference table. Hamburg's ruins stare back at the assembled night fighter commanders, block after block of carbonized wasteland where 40,000 people lived 6 weeks ago. Gentlemen, Hermann's voice cuts through the silence, we are losing this war one colored flare at a time. The Luftwaffe's initial dismissal of Pathfinder Force has transformed into desperate obsession. Intelligence analysts have finally decoded the British system. Elite marker aircraft arrive first, usually Mosquitos, too fast to intercept. They drop target indicators with precision that suggests radio navigation, the mysterious oboe signals German technicians can detect but not jam. The main force follows the markers like moths to flame, and entire cities burn in geometric patterns. Hermann proposes a radical countermeasure: wild sow, wild boar. Single-engine fighters, FW-190s and BF-109s, would patrol above bomber streams without radar guidance, using only visual contact. When Pathfinder flares ignite, the fighters dive through the illuminated sky, picking off bombers silhouetted against their own target markers. It's dangerous, primitive, and desperate. It's also the only tactic that might work. The first wild boar kill comes on August 23rd during a raid on Berlin. Unteroffizier Friedrich Karl Müller spots ein Lancaster suspended in the glow of green target indicators. One burst from his cannon, the bomber explodes. Müller claims 2 more before his fuel runs out. By dawn, wild boar pilots have downed 47 RAF bombers. Goebbels declares it a miracle. Pathfinder crews know it's just the beginning of a bloodier phase. Don Bennett responds with characteristic ruthlessness. He pulls Mosquito squadrons from marking duties and assigns them as marker escorts, fast fighter bombers that arrive with the Pathfinders but carry cannons instead of target indicators. When German fighters appear, the Mosquitoes engage them at the one thing they do better than anything in the sky. A Mosquito can outrun an FW-190 by 40 miles per hour, outdive it, and outmaneuver it in level flight. German pilots learn to fear the wooden aircraft with the red, white, blue roundels.
But the Luftwaffe adapts too. They study Pathfinder patterns, the sequence of illuminators, primary markers, backers up. Night fighter controllers begin positioning aircraft along known approach routes. Master searchlight batteries focus on the first wave, knowing those aircraft are the most valuable targets. In October 1943, Pathfinder losses spike to 11.4% per operation. Bennett loses 9 aircraft in a single night over Kassel.
The cruelest irony is that success makes the missions more dangerous. Every accurately marked target proves the Pathfinder's effectiveness, which justifies throwing more defenses at them. Hamburg's ruins convince Hitler to quadruple flak production. Goering orders night fighter strength increased by 60%. By November 1943, Germany operates 800 radar-equipped night fighters, triple the force that defended the Reich 6 months earlier. Yet the bombing continues with relentless precision. Pathfinders mark Cologne, Essen, Mannheim, Stuttgart. Each raid follows Hamburg's template: concentrated markers, saturated bombing, devastating accuracy. German war production should be collapsing. Factories should lie in ruins. The Third Reich should be suffocating under the weight of strategic bombing. It isn't, because despite the Pathfinder's precision, despite the firestorms and the casualty lists, German industry keeps producing more fighters, more tanks, more ammunition. The raids destroy cities, but somehow miss the factories. Speer decentralizes production. Workers relocate to dispersed facilities. The war machine adapts. And the Pathfinders face an uncomfortable truth. They've perfected the science of destroying cities. Whether they're winning the war is another question entirely. November 18th, 1943, 1945 hours, RAF Whiten, Cambridgeshire. Wing Commander John Fauquier watches his Mosquito crews file into the briefing room. Their faces show the strain of 30 consecutive operations, Hollow eyes, mechanical movements, the 1,000-yard stare that comes from flying into flak night after night. Tonight's target appears on the map behind him, and several men visibly flinch. Berlin. Again. This will be the 16th raid on Hitler's capital in 3 weeks. Arthur Harris has staked his reputation on destroying Berlin before spring, believing the city's annihilation will force German surrender. His famous signal to Churchill reads, "We can wreck Berlin from end to end. It will cost us 400 to 500 aircraft. It will cost Germany the war." The Pathfinders will lead every single raid, and Berlin, they're learning, is not Hamburg. The German capital sprawls across 340 square miles, 4 times Hamburg's size, with no distinctive geographical features for visual navigation. The Spree River meanders uselessly through indistinct suburbs. Smoke generators create artificial fog banks that obscure entire districts. Decoy fires blaze in outlying areas, perfect replicas of Pathfinder markers. And the flak, 900 heavy guns in coordinated batteries, turns the sky into a steel carton. Worse, Berlin sits 400 miles from England. That's 800 miles round trip, much of it over enemy territory, crawling with night fighters. The Mosquitos can make the journey, their speed and ceiling provide some protection. But the heavy bombers, Lancasters and Halifaxes, carrying the main force, must fly straight and level through the defenses. They're losing 50 aircraft per raid. The mathematics are brutal. At this rate, Bomber Command will cease to exist before Berlin does. Fokker's crews take off at 20:15 hours. They'll reach Berlin at 23:30, mark the government district, and be home by 03, if they survive. The Mosquitos climb to 28,000 feet, where the air is thin enough to freeze human blood, but makes them almost impossible to intercept. Below, the bomber stream forms up. 444 Lancasters, 82 Halifaxes, each carrying 7 young men who know the odds. 23:27 hours, Berlin approach. Searchlights erupt across the horizon, 150 beams sweeping methodically. Master searchlights lock onto aircraft, and slave lights follow, creating cones of light that German gunners use for precise ranging. A Lancaster caught in the beams simply disintegrates, torn apart by 88mm shells. Fokker counts 3 more bombers dying in the first minute over the target. The Pathfinder Mosquitos drop their markers through the chaos. Red target indicators blossom over the Tiergarten district, but smoke from earlier fires obscures them within seconds. Green markers follow, then yellow backers up. The problem becomes immediately apparent. The markers are scattered across a 3-mile radius. Some burn in the zoo, others illuminate residential blocks miles from the aiming point. The main force arrives and bombs the colored fires, but half the bombs fall on suburbs, while the government quarter remains untouched. This is the Pathfinder's nightmare, perfect execution rendered meaningless by smoke, weather, and the sheer size of the target. The raid causes extensive damage, 1,500 dead, 175,000 homeless, but misses every significant government building. Goebbels broadcasts from his office the next morning, his voice clear and unshaken. The message to Britain is unmistakable. Berlin still stands. The raids continue with numbing repetition. November 22nd, 764 bombers, 20 lost. November 23rd, 383 bombers, 20 lost. November 26th, 443 bombers, 28 lost. Each time, the Pathfinders mark with precision. Each time, Berlin's defenses shred the bomber stream. Each time, the city absorbs the punishment and continues functioning. The Luftwaffe's night fighter force reaches its apex during the Berlin campaign. Major Heinrich Prinz zu Wittgenstein, an aristocrat with 83 confirmed kills, develops tactics specifically for Pathfinder hunting. His U-88 carries advanced radar that can detect the oboe transmissions. When Pathfinder Mosquitos arrive, Wittgenstein positions his fighter beneath them, climbing into their blind spot. His upward-firing cannon, Schräge Musik,
tears through aluminum fuselages without warning. He shoots down 5 Pathfinder aircraft in January 1944 alone. Bennett loses 25% of his original crews by February. Replacements arrive weekly, young navigators and pilots with minimal training, thrown into the most dangerous operations in Bomber Command. Some last 3 missions.
Some don't survive their first. The Pathfinder badge becomes a death sentence as much as an honor. Yet they keep marking, keep flying, keep dying in flames 20,000 feet above cities that refuse to surrender. March 30th, 1944, 22:03 hours, 19,000 feet above Nuremberg. Flight Lieutenant Robert Baxter's Mosquito shudders through turbulent air, the target indicators in his bomb bay shifting with each jolt. Tonight feels wrong from the start. The Met officer predicted cloud cover. Instead, a full moon illuminates the bomber stream like daylight. Contrails mark every aircraft's position, and the Luftwaffe night fighters, invisible in the darkness below, are climbing toward them with methodical precision.
Baxter reaches the initial point and begins his marking run. Through the Perspex nose, he can see other Pathfinder aircraft, too many of them burning. A Lancaster explodes to starboard, scattering flaming debris across the sky. Another spirals downward, trailing fire. The raid hasn't even reached Nuremberg, and the bomber stream is already hemorrhaging aircraft. He releases his target indicators over what should be the old city center. Red markers ignite, but they're scattered, inaccurate. The winds are stronger than forecast. Smoke from burning bombers obscures the ground. Other Pathfinders drop their loads, trying to correct the aim point, but the markers form a chaotic constellation across Nuremberg's outskirts. When the main force arrives, they bomb the colored fires as trained, hitting suburbs, forests, empty fields. The industrial targets remain untouched. By dawn, 95 bombers are missing. 95! Nearly 12% of the attacking force, annihilated in a single night. It's the worst Pathfinder loss rate of the war. 11 marker aircraft destroyed, their elite crews, irreplaceable men with dozens of operations, dead or captured. For Bennett, Nuremberg represents something more devastating than losses. It represents failure of the entire system. The raid forces a brutal reassessment. Hamburg worked because conditions were perfect. Clear weather, weak defenses, a compact city near the coast where oboe functioned flawlessly.
Berlin failed because the city was too large, too distant, too well defended. Nuremberg proves that even with Pathfinders, even with precision marking, strategic bombing can still turn into mass slaughter of crews and civilians alike with minimal military impact. But salvation comes from an unexpected direction: invasion. By April 1944, the Allied plan for D-Day requires absolute air superiority over France. Bomber Command receives new orders: stop attacking German cities. Start destroying French railways, bridges, marshalling yards, targets that require Pathfinder precision but sit only minutes from England's coast. The markers work perfectly at short range. Oboe signals remain strong. Fighter escorts can accompany bombers all the way to target and back. The results are devastating for German logistics. Pathfinder crews mark the railway junction at traps with such accuracy that every bomb falls within the target area. Bridges over the Seine collapse under precision attacks. The Luftwaffe, expecting raids on Germany, finds itself helpless as French transportation infrastructure disintegrates. By June 5, 1944, every major railway line between Germany and the Normandy coast has been cut. Wehrmacht reinforcements will need weeks to reach the invasion beaches, weeks they won't have. D-Day itself showcases the Pathfinders at their finest. On June 6th, before dawn, Mosquito crews mark German coastal batteries with perfect accuracy. Heavy bombers follow, cratering defensive positions that would have slaughtered thousands of Allied soldiers. Then, Pathfinders mark inland targets, crossroads, ammunition dumps, command posts. The marking is so precise that Allied commanders later credit it with saving the invasion from becoming a catastrophic bloodbath. Squadron leader Leonard Cheshire develops an even more audacious technique: ultra-low-level marking. Flying his Mosquito at 200 feet, below flak and fighter altitude, he places target indicators directly on factory roofs, bunker entrances, railway bridges. The first test comes at the V weapon site in Mimoyex, France. Cheshire marks at rooftop height. Following Lancasters demolish the site with 12,000-pound tallboy bombs. The technique works so well that Cheshire receives the Victoria Cross, though Bennett privately considers the tactic suicidal. Yet even as Pathfinder techniques improve, moral questions intensify. Group Captain Hamish Mahadi, Bennett's recruiting officer, later admits, "We knew we were burning civilians. We knew children died in our firestorms. But we'd seen London burning, Coventry destroyed, British children pulled from rubble. The Germans started this. We finished it." The final phase of the bombing campaign begins in autumn 1944. With Allied armies advancing across France, Pathfinder Force returns to German cities, but with a difference. Now they mark specific industrial targets: synthetic oil plants, tank factories, and ball-bearing works. The raids are smaller, more focused, more accurate. A February 1945 attack on the Luna oil refinery puts 85% of bombs within the target area. German fuel production collapses, not from area bombing, but from precision destruction of irreplaceable facilities. February 13th, 1945, 21:51 hours, over Saxony. Master bomber, Wing Commander Maurice Smith watches Dresden appear through the darkness, a medieval jewel on the Elbe River, largely untouched by 3 years of strategic bombing. The city's Baroque churches and Renaissance palaces glow in the moonlight, packed with 600,000 residents, plus an estimated 200,000 refugees fleeing the advancing Red Army. Tonight, the Pathfinders will erase it from existence. Smith's orders are brutally simple. Create a firestorm. After Hamburg, after the tactical successes in France, Bomber Command knows exactly how to generate the phenomenon. The Pathfinders have perfected the recipe. Mark the old city center, where timber-framed buildings cluster densely, saturate it with incendiaries. Let physics do the rest. At 22:14 hours, the first wave of Pathfinder Lancasters drops their target indicators. Red markers ignite over the Altstadt, the Old Town, with characteristic precision. The aiming point sits between the Frauenkirche and the main railway station, where medieval streets form a labyrinth of combustible architecture. Green backers up reinforce the marking. Everything is textbook perfect. The main force arrives 9 minutes later. 244 Lancasters bomb the colored fires in a concentrated pattern that would make Hamburg look scattered. High explosives blast roofs open. Incendiaries pour into exposed interiors, 650,000 firebombs in 13 minutes. By 22:40 hours, the Altstadt is burning in a configuration that meteorologists will recognize immediately: the temperature and updraft conditions for firestorm. Smith circles the city, watching his handiwork develop. The fires merge into a single conflagration. The smoke column rises to 15,000 feet, glowing orange from within. He radios the second wave, another 529 Lancasters scheduled to arrive in 3 hours, and confirms: target well alight, markers clearly visible, attack as planned. The second wave drops 1,800 tons of bombs into fires that are already consuming the city. The firestorm, now fully developed, generates winds exceeding 100 miles per hour. Temperatures in the burning core reach 1,000 degrees Celsius. Underground shelters become ovens. The Frauenkirche survived the 30 Years' War, Napoleon, the First World War, collapses into rubble. The Semper Opera House melts. The Zwinger Palace burns. By dawn on February 14th, 1,600 acres of Dresden's historic center have been incinerated. Casualty estimates vary wildly.
25,000 according to modern historians, though contemporary reports claim numbers exceeding 100,000. What's certain is that the Pathfinders marked with their characteristic precision, and Dresden burned with the same geometric perfection as Hamburg. But this time, something breaks in the public consciousness. Dresden wasn't an industrial city.
It had no significant military value. Refugees, women, children, elderly, died by thousands. Even some bomber command crews questioned the necessity. An Associated Press reporter describes the ruins. "I have seen Cologne, Hamburg, Essen. Nothing compares to this deliberate terror bombing." Churchill, sensing political disaster, distances himself from the raid with remarkable speed.
His memo to the Chiefs of Staff on March 28 questions the bombing of German cities simply for the sake of increasing terror. Arthur Harris, who planned Dresden, who demanded the firestorm, is quietly excluded from post-war honors while his crews receive campaign medals. The hypocrisy is breathtaking. Don Bennett says nothing publicly, but in private papers discovered decades later, he admits, "We had perfected the science of destruction." Whether we should have used it so indiscriminately is a question for historians, not airmen. The Pathfinders fly their final marking mission on April 25, 1945, an attack on Hitler's Berchtesgaden retreat. The war in Europe ends 2 weeks later. Of the 50,490 men who served in Pathfinder Force, 3,727 were killed, a casualty rate of 7.4%, compared to 5.1% for Bomber Command overall. The difference seems small until you realize it represents hundreds of elite crews, irreplaceable navigators, and bomb aimers dead in the last year of a war already won. The final accounting is stark. Pathfinder Force participated in 3,440 operations. They marked 1,190 cities, factories, and military targets with precision that transformed strategic bombing from feudal area attacks into devastatingly accurate strikes. Their innovations, oboe navigation, low-level marking, colored target indicators, became standard doctrine for every air force that followed.